Welcome back to another round of Bases Picks. Now I'm going to do this one a little bit different to usual, just because there's 3 different events on this weekend. Almost kind of forgot about the Sky Sports and Boxer collaboration card with KO Promotions, which is Alan Babic versus Lucas Rozansky, so I've got to put that in there. But what I'm going to do for this, I'm not going to give any takes on the undercard fights. I'm just going to give my straight predictions, and then I'm going to go into a little bit of background on the main events and my rationale for whatever pick I choose for the 3 different main events that are happening this weekend. So hopefully you guys like this and prefer it. If not, we can go back to another model, or I can just go back to selecting certain fights and we'll see where we go. But for now, let's get into the picks. Okay, so let's start with the KO Promotions card, which is being co-promoted by Boxer for Sky Sports. So you've got Jamie TKV versus Mikhail Bolos. I'm going Jamie TKV via points. Steed Woodall versus Boris Crichton. I'm going to go for Boris Crichton on points. Got Martin Bakole versus Ihor Shevazhutsky, otherwise known as Hulk. I'm going to go with Bakole via stoppage in about round 6 or 7. Laura Glazeb versus Maria Secchi for the vacant EBU title at Super Bantam. I'm going to go with Glazeb on points. And I believe the co-main event is Mikhail Sislak versus Dylan Breguion, which is also for the vacant EBU European Cruiserweight title. And I'm going to go for Sislak, and I'm going to go by way of stoppage around round 9 or 10. Right, now going to the main event, you've got Alan Babic versus Lucas Rozansky. Now, from what I can remember, Rozansky hasn't actually been that active over the last 3 years. I think he's had like 1 fight in the last 3 years, basically, I guess, since the pandemic started, which doesn't necessarily inspire great confidence, but he is a puncher. I have seen some of his KOs before. He hasn't necessarily been in there with anyone of like the greatest of note, but he's got some decent names on his record, and he is one of the stars of Poland at this sort of time. Now let's talk about Alan Babic a little bit. Now he has, in terms of his particular career progression, been very inactive over the last 12 months or so. Not his fault. He had, as we saw in his very last fight against Adam Bolski, which was my personal fight of the year 2022, that took place in May of that year, and he hasn't fought since then. Several things have happened, but he's been inactive. Now he's always been a person whereby I feel like the activity benefited him, but also you can kind of tell that he's showing early-ish kind of signs of wear and tear. He's had a pretty decent amateur career. He had over I think it was over 120 amateur bouts, for Croatia. But he's a guy that's always in the gym, always sparring very big guys. So I can assume that he's taken a lot of heavy blows like throughout his days as an amateur and as a pro. Now, I don't know much about Rozansky's background in terms of the amateurs and that, but I don't think he had a very vast amateur career at all. So a lot of what he's learning has been as a pro. So I feel like because Alan Babic does actually have pretty good fundamentals, I've seen them. He hasn't obviously let them go as a pro as such, but you don't have 120 plus amateur fights and not know the basic fundamentals. So even though he does wing in a lot of shots, I think a lot of that is purely just because he's fighting bigger guys, so he feels like trying to set things up or trying to box with them isn't the way that he's going to have success. He's going to have success by basically just driving his fist straight through their jaw, and that's going to be the only way that he's going to get the victories in those fights. It's very much sort of fight or flight mentality. mentality, and his mentality is just going to be to fight it out. I think he realizes now, moving a bit forward in his career, that that's not the way to go, especially if he wants longevity. He has been hurt in his last couple fights, so maybe the time away has done him a little bit of good in terms of healing, even if like there will be some ring rust on him, and it might take him a while to sort of get used to those heavy punches again. Ultimately, the way I kind of see this fight going, again, I don't have a huge background of Rosansky's work, but I've seen enough of it, but the inactivity on him I feel is going to tell a bit more, but I feel like both guys are going to be durable, and just like Alen Babic ended up going 10 rounds with Bulski in his last fight, I do think this fight is going to go the full distance. I think both guys are going to be a bit more cautious than they normally would, especially the fact that it's for a world title. You don't want to throw caution to the wind when the title's on the line. So I do see it getting to points, but I see Babic doing enough to get a points victory. I'm not sure whether it's a UD or a split decision, but yeah, I can see him racking up at least sort of 7 of the earlier rounds, and then maybe tapering off his work towards the end of the fight, and yeah, sort of getting the victory that way. Now, of course, knowing these kind of things, it could be over within 4, but I do think it will go the distance. I think both guys are going to be durable enough to be able to see the final bell, no matter what happens. So that is my prediction: Alen Babic on points, UD or split decision victory. Okay, so next up we've got the Matchroom card, which is Shavkat Rakhimov versus Joe Cordina for the super featherweight IBF championship. Now, just going through the card real quick, I'm gonna start from the last fight on Before the Bell, which is Sky Nicholson versus Linda Lecker. It's not for Sky's previous, I think she was the previous EBU holder at featherweight. I think she vacated that. And this is an 8-rounder, I believe. So quite simply, Sky Nicholson on points. If Raven Chapman couldn't put down Linda Lecker and stop her, no chance Sky's going to do so. Next, we got Gavin Gwynn versus Craig Woodruff. I believe that Gwynn is going to repeat on points and beat Craig Woodruff again. So yeah, Gavin Gwynn to win that one for me. Next, we got the IBF European Cruiserweight title, which is Jordan Thompson versus Luke Watkins. Luke Watkins, good operator, but I think Jordan Thompson is going to make a statement. I think he's going to take him out in between the 5th and the 7th round of this fight. I'm leaning closer to the 5th, but yeah, between 5 and 7 is my prediction. Next one is Zelfa Brown Flash Barrett versus Jason Sanchez, and this one is the WBA Continental Super Featherweight title, so a trinket belt. But if Zelfa does win this, I think he will be a next voluntary for Joe Cordina if he wins the main event. So I predict that Zelfa Barrett will win this fight on points. Yeah, basically I just think he's going to do enough work on the early half of this fight to be able to kind of control it. But Jason Sanchez is very durable, so I don't think he'll be able to get the KO. But yes, Zelfa Barrett on points is the pick. Right, moving to the main event now. Shavkat Rakhimov versus Joe Cordina. So Joe Cordina has been to the world level on one occasion prior, which was against Ogawa, where obviously he scored that tremendous knockout in the 2nd round of that fight. Subsequently caught I think it was a little hairline fracture in his hand. Went into sparring for the Shavkat Rakhimov fight and broke his hand, got stripped of the title. Rakhimov then fought Zelfa Barrett for the vacant title and Champion Series in Abu Dhabi last November, but instantly signed on to fight Joe Cordina for the belt. So Joe's got the opportunity to be a 2-time IBF champ without ever actually losing the belt in the ring. Now, I looked at both of these guys on the scales earlier on today. Neither of them actually looked that great. They were both quite badly drawn in, you know, very dry. Their skin sort of looked a bit taut, didn't really look like that malleable, that flexible, so you can tell that they had properly drained out a lot of fluid from their bodies to make the weight. But of the two, I think Shavkat actually looked the worst. His eyes looked very sunken in, his cheeks looked very gaunt, his skin looked malnourished. He looked to me, he looked in a pretty bad way. Now, I've seen him look a little like that before, but not as bad as that. So while I think that Joe Cordina is going to win this fight, I was kind of thinking that anyway. Initially, I kind of thought that he would win it on points. Now I can see a potential stoppage happening towards the back half of the fight. But here's how I kind of see things, is to sort of round it up a bit. Shavkat is a very good pressure fighter, but he's almost like a pressuring boxer puncher. He is a pressure fighter by definition, but why I say he's like almost like a pressuring boxer puncher is because he does try to employ the jab while he's applying that front foot pressure, while he's moving his feet into range of his opponent. He's very quick to actually get his feet into position. He's also very quick to cut off angles and cut off the ring. The only people that really sort of prevent him from being able to do that in the best possible style are those with sort of fast twitch muscles, but those people normally kind of gas out after a little while, as you kind of saw happen with Zelfa Barrett. Now, Shavkat being a southpaw pressure fighter also adds a very different dynamic, because he comes in from angles that a normal orthodox fighter wouldn't usually expect to see, so it takes them a bit of time to adjust, and while they're trying to adjust to that, he's popping that jab out, you know, to then try and get them into corners, rip into the body, throw in the backhand, throw in, you know, sort of that lead hand uppercut as well. And he's very slick at sometimes trying to apply that lead uppercut to backhand straight combination. He can employ that very effectively, and also the lead hand hook to sort of the temple is a shot that he likes to operate with at times as well. But I do see Joe Cordina sort of being able to box and move, pivot around the target and use a lot more natural movements, as opposed to like sort of fast twitch that take up more energy. So I can see him kind of boxing very comfortably around Shavkat in the first part of the fight, but then obviously having to worry about kind of the back half, because that seems to be where Shavkat's normally a guy that actually starts fast and then tails off when he thinks he's in a controlled lead. But against like proper boxers and movers, people that don't just sort of stand toe to toe, he will sort of try to wear them down gradually throughout the rounds to take them out a bit later. So I feel that Joe Cordina is gonna command a pretty strong lead towards the start, and then Shavkat will kind of come into it more towards the back end of the fight. I'm not sure about the strength of the hand though, because obviously this is his first fight back. We don't know how strong he's going to be able to throw that, and you know, if he does, you know, throw it really heavy and hard, is he going to damage it again? You know, will he have to come through the fight with a little bit of trepidation on, you know, is the hand fully healed? Because this will be his first time punching in the, you know, the 8-ounce or the 10-ounce gloves. So yeah, there's a lot of things there that I feel like are gonna play factors into how this goes. I don't think the KO is going to occur in this one. I'm going to go back to my original prediction, just because I feel like both guys are actually going to rehydrate back to a decent enough level. Joe Cordina doesn't hugely invest in the body, and I think the body is where Shavkat's gonna take the most damage. So yeah, I think that ultimately he's going to rack up a lot of the early rounds. I would say 5 of the first 8, and then maybe take 1 or 2 maybe even 3 of the last 4. So to make a sort of like a 7-5 at 8, 7-5 at 8-4 sort of scenario to regain his belt in Cardiff. So the close rounds are going to go to him without a doubt. So yeah, my prediction is Joe Cordina will win this on points. UD I'm predicting as well. Okay, and last but not least, it's the fight that a lot of people have been waiting for. Not me particularly. I don't actually feel like it's been that big of a promotion for me, but that's just my personal opinion. It is Gervonta Tank Davis versus King Ryan Garcia, taking place in Las Vegas, Nevada, and it will likely be a ring walk time of about 5 o'clock in the morning. So let's get to the few undercard fights that I've got thus far, and then we'll get to the main event. So the very first one is Elijah Garcia versus Kevin Salgado. I think Elijah Garcia is going to win that fight by way of stoppage in about round 7. I'm going to go sort of round 7, round 8. Then you've got Gabriel Rosado versus Bektomir Melikuziev, aka Bek the Bully 2. So the rematch from their initial fight. Quite simply, Bek the Bully is gonna get his revenge on Gabe Rosado for the freak upset that happened, and is going to knock out Gabe Rosado fairly early. I'm thinking by about the 5th round, round 4, round 5, yeah, 6 rounds at maximum, but yeah, it's not going past 6, unfortunately. Last one is David Morrell Jr. versus Yamaguchi Falcao. Now I haven't seen a huge amount of Falcao, quite frankly, but I've seen more than enough of David Morrell Jr. to know exactly what he's about. I see this ending in a knockout at around about round 9 or 10. I'm gonna go round 9. Last but not least, we've got Gervonta Tank Davis versus King Ryan Garcia. No belts on the line, no regulars or any other WBC made up titles that I'm aware of. It's fought at a catch weight of 136 pounds. So not only is it a catch weight for Ryan Garcia, who's competed his last couple fights at 140, but there's a rehydration clause as well, which means he can't gain more than 10 pounds after their weigh-in, which from what I can tell is supposed to be taking place at 11 o'clock UK time. So that is 1 o'clock, that is 3 o'clock West Coast or Pacific time in the US, and what's that, also I think that's 5 o'clock, that's 5 o'clock sort of East Coast time. So very, very late weigh-in. So I'm going to assume it's a ceremonial one, as I'm sure they can't be allowing the fighters to not eat or drink for that amount of time. So yeah, I think the weigh-ins probably happened already, and then they'll do the ceremonial ones a little later on in the day. So when you look at this fight, ultimately every single thing in this fight is in Tank Davis's favor. They put a stipulation on Ryan Garcia that he couldn't have a warm-up fight prior to having this one, otherwise the fight would be off. So Ryan hasn't fought since July last year. He's obviously made it a catch weight at 136 pounds when I believe Ryan's team initially wanted it at a catch weight of 138. Ryan has accepted obviously the rehydration clause, so he can't be above 146 pounds. I think it's the morning of the fight, so that'll be tomorrow morning, and I think that second day weigh-in is due to take place at 12. I think it's 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock. Hopefully it will actually only take place at like 11, so that you get the rest of the day to hydrate, but who knows. And there's been, I guess, loads of other little things and advantages that Tank's team have wanted. So you say to yourself, well, he has all the advantage for this fight. But then you say, well, he says that Ryan's not a complete fighter. Ryan for the most part is a prospect still. He hasn't done a huge amount to say that he's at the contender or championship levels, but this is the extent that Team Davis is going to, just to get an advantage over someone who hasn't done anything in the game thus far. So that, I guess, kind of tells you how much of a threat they do take Ryan. Ultimately, look, if I give my opinion on this fight, to me, it's not really one that particularly interests me, but I will be watching because I want to see how the dynamics of everything that's played out in terms of the negotiations works. Now, Tank Davis, ultimately a very accurate fighter, but also a very low volume fighter. Barely throws any punches any round, does a lot of assessment in the ring. He will kind of pick up patterns and sort of use his punches to almost as a measuring stick to kind of see what you do and see if you repeat the same patterns, and then read those patterns and then try to counter them. He hasn't got the quickest feet, but he's got very good footwork. He's got a very solid base. Never been down on the canvas, from anything other than a tangle of legs. So, very sort of solid base as well, very stocky. But he also does eat a lot of shots. Now, whether he respects someone's power and he almost just wants to feel what they're like, but he'll stand behind a very high guard, won't really slip a lot, and he might just take those shots flush, and you'll see that he'll take a shot, and then maybe counter it on the third time. So against someone like Ryan Garcia, that's very dangerous, because Ryan is extremely quick with both hands and he's very heavy-handed as well. And I feel like Davis is going to have to go back to more of his IQ boxing and moving, trying to find his way onto the inside. He's not going to be able to win this fight from the outside, because Ryan's jab and even his left hook, the short left hook and the extended one, I feel will actually catch Davis trying to box on the outside. So Davis has actually got to try and find his way onto the inside, stay more mid-range, and make Ryan have to work in and around those exchanges while Tank is there looking for the opening. So he's almost going to have to box a bit like a pressure fighter to be able to sort of offset Ryan. Now, one of Ryan's biggest weaknesses is he does no lateral movement whatsoever. Nothing is side to side, everything is front and back. So if he stays in straight lines, he will be a sitting duck for Tank Davis's leaping backhand, especially if Tank tries to blind him with a pouring jab to sort of just distract him, step in behind it, use that straight backhand. Now, the only benefit for Ryan with in this sense, the only thing I can kind of give him a credence for is the fact that because he is so much taller and he's fairly nimble as well, he may be able to avoid a lot of the straight shots from Tank if Tank launches from a bit too far out. He wasn't able to do it with Luke Campbell, but Luke Campbell is also the same size as him with much longer arms. So you would hope that Ryan would sort of learn how to move away from trajectory a little bit more. But look, that's roughly a breakdown of the two. Obviously, we know Ryan, the main thing you've got to look out for is that left hook that is so fast you can't prepare for it. There's still times now, the left hook with who was it, Fundora, and was it Fundora? Yeah, whereby even now I still can't see it when I'm watching the video. I have to keep slowing it down to see how he lands the shot. Fortuna, sorry, not Fundora, Fortuna. Yeah, and if he catches Tank with that, Tank will wobble, and Ryan is a very good finisher, and he does employ a lot of work to the body as well. Now, going for the body with Tank will be very dangerous, because he'll be leaving himself wide open and he'll be having to dip down to actually reach Tank's body, which means that Tank will be able to swing an overhand left over the top, which will definitely take Ryan's legs away. Ultimately, I haven't seen how they look at the weigh-ins. I saw how they looked yesterday. Both of them looked a bit dry, a little bit gaunt. So I'd have to see obviously how they look today. I've got to assume that they're not going to be looking their best, but I will assume that Tank will probably look a little bit better than Ryan and will probably do a bit better in the rehydration, just being a naturally smaller guy, even though he's a lot more stocky. How do I see the fight going? Look, I've got to look at this thing in invariables, and the invariables of this fight is that one person has been calling for it since 2019, and that one person is Ryan Garcia. Tank has kind of avoided this fight, has never really thought it's going to take place. Ryan Garcia has pushed and pushed and pushed, has been on social media, has basically campaigned for it. Now, usually that doesn't mean that that person is going to win, but it just feels like Ryan Garcia wants it more than Tank. I feel like Tank's got a lot of other things going on outside the ring, and I feel like Ryan's will maybe just makes him want this more. I feel like he's been studying Tank a lot more than Tank has been studying him throughout his career. Ryan has always been calling for this fight, like I said, the last 4 years. I can't ignore that. So my prediction for this fight is a Ryan Garcia win. I don't know how. I'm not going to predict whether KO or points. I just think his will is going to be what gets it done. So yeah, I'm predicting Ryan Garcia to win, but I can't give an outright prediction, so it's just an outright bet. Please leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think is going to happen between these two. I know the majority of people are probably going to go with Tank. Again, that's the smart option, but there's the invariables I just can't get out of my head at this moment in time. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. Let me know if you prefer this new format or if you want me to go back to just being selective with it. But that is Basis Picks locked.